Hello, welcome everybody to another edition of Voices Interviews, where we interview authors from our latest edition of Voices, Volume 20, Number 3, now available at voices.no. Tonight, I am happy to be interviewing the author of Considering Abramson's McMusicTherapy McMarketing article, A Personal Reflection, by Kerry Byers. In addition, we have a special guest, our Dr. Brian Abrams, the author of the original article, McMusicTherapy McMarketing, will be joining us as well. Kerry will share with us this evening her 30-plus years experience working as a music therapist in Canada and being a private practitioner, and how Brian's original article, McMusicTherapy McMarketing, influenced the ethics of how she views marketing within her own practice and music therapy. All right, well, welcome. Thank you. Thank you both for being here. Thank you, Kerry, and thank you, Brian. And just want to start with introducing yourselves, and we'll start with Kerry, as you are the author of this article. Maybe you could just introduce yourself and let us know where you're from.
Okay, I live in London, Ontario. I've been a music therapist for 30 years. I studied at Michigan State University and came back here and developed a private practice. 10 years in, went back to school while still working and did my master's and my PhD. And I'm still working as a clinical music therapist.
And of course, we've invited Dr. Brian Abrams to join us here today, being that your article was inspired by Dr. Abrams, Brian's first article that he wrote on the topic. Brian, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Brian. I live here in northern New Jersey. I teach at Montclair State University. I've been there for about 13 years. I have been a music therapist since 1995. I did my undergraduate work at SUNY New Paltz, graduate work, master's and PhD at Temple. Um, really worked across the lifespan in numerous communities. Spent most of my time doing private practice, music psychotherapy, things like GIM, analytical music therapy, and other forms of improvisational and compositional music therapy. And just really honored to be here and really appreciate what Kerry's done and look forward to this.
Great. Yeah, I look forward to it too. It's great to have you both together and exploring this topic a little bit. And, Kerry, I thought you would be, if we could start off with just, your 30 years experience as being a music therapist, building a private practice, and then coming across Brian's original article on the relation of the McDonaldization. I can never say it. McMarketing of music therapy. Can you talk a little bit about that journey of being a therapist for 30 years, developing a private practice over the past many years, and then coming across that article? What was that experience like for you, and how was that a pivotal moment for you in understanding your work as a private practitioner?
Okay, that's a huge question. Just, you know, it's been a long 30 years and quite the journey. So I studied in the States and I came back to Canada being a behaviorally trained music therapist. And in Canada, that was not the thing. Music therapy was new in Canada, but as a behavioral music therapist, I was an outsider. And then trying to establish work in my area, which there really wasn't music therapy. So a lot of my time was spent educating people, doing presentations. At one point, I was doing 2 presentations a week for years, getting my name out there and trying to find work, and trying to stick to my conceptualization of music therapy. And I did manage to develop a part-time job at a CPRI, Child and Parent Resource Institute, working with teenagers specifically who were stuck in this facility. It was supposed to be a short-term facility, but they had some teenagers who had severe cognitive and behavioral issues, so severe that they couldn't be out in the community. So they gave me a chance. And what I found was the behavioral approach really worked with these guys. It helped them get their behaviors under control. And then we were able to look at the reasons for the behaviors, which in almost all but one case, it was because they had no way to communicate yes or no or more, or I don't want to do that. So we developed those skills, and then the rest of the team tried to generalize that to their general life. But in the meantime, myself and music had become really important. So then it was like, what am I going to do? Behavioral and developmental music therapy is no longer appropriate. Luckily, I ran into Colin Lee, who helped me come to understand Nordhoff Robbins, which was awesome. I learned so much from him, and he gave me the skills to take my approach and adapt it so I could continue to work with these teens. And then as my private practice developed outside of CPRI, I had to expand what I was doing, because if I just stuck with what I knew, there wasn't enough work. There weren't people willing to give me a chance, but there was also, I had a really narrow niche of who I was working with. So I had to expand what I was doing. It was really hard. London, Ontario, Canada is known as a test market. So we get all kinds of things thrown into London. It's like the test market in North America. So if something survives in London, it's a good chance it's going to survive elsewhere. But it makes, it's very unusual, but it makes developing anything really hard. So music therapy, of course, I picked the hardest place in Canada to do that. I've managed to survive, but it's been, sometimes it's like, am I really that bad at being a business person? I know what I have is of value. How come I can't reach people? And it's been word of mouth, and it's been by people seeing what I do, or I do a presentation. And I know as soon as I do, there's the 5-10 minutes where I'm actually doing music, people get it. They get excited about what I do. But until they get to that point, they don't understand what music therapy is, and they're not open to it. So reading Brian's article was so amazing as I'm reading through it and writing notes. As my thoughts came out, it's like, wow, it made sense of everything that I had gone through. It wasn't because I was bad at doing business. It wasn't because I wasn't good at what I was doing. It was because there's these forces I was dealing with that I did not know existed at the time. I was trying, to do music therapy. I wasn't selling a product. I was selling the process of music therapy. So it validated everything I had gone through and made me feel better for everything I had gone through. It made sense of it. So thank you, Brian. I really appreciated that. Yeah.
That's a story that I'm sure many people can resonate without a doubt. And there's so much history and detail and complexity to the history you've shared, from your entry into music therapy within 1990 and the cultural perspectives that educators were sharing during that time that influenced you, moving to Canada, trying to start a private practice within a unique cultural context. And an amazing journey, and amazing to hear how that article resonated with you. And Brian, as you hear that story, I'm thinking about the original McMusicTherapy McMarketing article, which is certainly an evocative title, and was wondering, what are the aspects of that story that stood out to you in relation to the core concepts of that article? If you could kind of go over that a little bit for our viewers.
Yeah, absolutely. And first, I got to thank you, Kerry, for the enormous honor of, I mean, first of all, exhuming this sarcophagus of an article that was written some time ago, and I didn't think it would see the light of day again. So I really appreciate that it resonated with you, and that you shared your perspective honestly, with others, and it feels very affirming, to me, that others resonate with this experience, because for me it was very real. I could just kind of share my journey in music therapy. in many ways similar. It's no secret that the United States is, very capitalist oriented. Things, in order for something to be successful in the United States, even a public service like music therapy, it's got to be sold. So I became acutely aware of that early on. When I was first interested in music therapy, it was because of my lifelong relationship to music and understanding how the arts enriches human lives and development and communities. And I was so excited about being a part of that, as a stakeholder, and realized kind of quickly, the reality hit me, being in the United States, that if we, doing that, there's a price that comes with that, which is that, you need to present it as a kind of a commodity, as a sort of a product. And that it bothered me to see colleagues needing to market their practices in these kind of commercialistic ways, I just sort of sat with that and realized, all right, well, that's just one of those things we need to negotiate. And I tried my best to stick to the integrity of what I believed our field was about, that the relationship and honoring others and the experience of sharing music for growing and for healing, and trying to stay as clear from the commercial side as possible. But being in the system, none of us can totally escape it. We're in it. We're part of it. We perpetuate it. It's like it's like any other system of oppression, white supremacy. We're in it, so we're part of it, and we have to think about how we can deconstruct it from the inside. And that was always on my mind. And there were many times when I wasn't very popular for critiquing the commercial side of music therapy. People would say, like, "Hey, Brian, what's your problem? People are getting jobs. They get to do music therapy. Isn't that great?" But I always thought, yeah, but what's the collateral damage? Aren't we hurting ourselves and the public we serve in the process? And so, I sat with this, and really thanks to Voices and thanks to, Sue Hadley, and I'll take this opportunity to thank Mike, for making this opportunity possible. An encouragement earlier on from Sue Hadley in writing this article. I was able to share in a kind of a legitimized way through Voices this point of view, this critique. And it brought me back to my Vassar College days, my first undergraduate before music therapy at New Paltz, where I encountered a sociologist who was a guest speaker. His name was George Ritzer. And, I had been, my major was not sociology, but I took a lot of sociology electives. I was really interested in it. And, I was going to be a big bad Marxist and study all the sociologists and, Weber was part of that. And so when I heard that George Ritzer was coming, and by the way, George Ritzer happened to be the dad of one of the guys I hung out with at Vassar. Yeah, so Jeremy Ritzer, shout out to Jeremy. And I'm sure it was embarrassing for him, for his dad to come give a lecture. But anyway, but he's brilliant. George Ritzer was brilliant. And he took the theories of Weber from the earlier 20th century and transformed them into something more contemporary at the time. His book, The McDonaldization of America, where he used McDonald's in the fast food industry as a kind of a metaphor for the whole transactional means end way that we've begun to regard one another in society, and how that sort of changed our point of view of one another and the ethical implications. And so he eventually came out with that book a few years after he gave this address. It was 1993 is the book. But when he gave that address, it really resonated with me. It sat with me. So years later, when I was encouraged to write this article, this column for Voices, I went back to that and I accessed what I remembered about Ritzer's presentation and how it reminded me of what I learned in sociology class about Weber and those four principles, the four things that Weber talked about in his explanation of rationalization, which Ritzer turned into McDonaldization. And I thought about too. I was thinking about McDonald's itself, because that's the name we're using in the metaphor, and how everyone thinks, oh, McDonald's. Well, that was Ray Kroc. Ray Kroc was a genius who came up with McDonald's, but the name comes from the McDonald's brothers, who really started the franchise, they were community people. You know, they were like, let's give people a good quality meal at an affordable price and serve the community. And, you know, it's not like they didn't have some dollar signs in their eyes, but it wasn't the neon dollar signs that Kroc had when he took things over and began to mass market and really turn it into this more Weberian, rationalized, transactional experience rather than what the McDonald's brothers originally envisioned. So it's like in that 1950s landscape, kind of before even the neoliberalism really kicked in, here was this prototype for what would come. And so that was the backdrop for what I was thinking about my experience of music therapy. Here's this beautiful experience, this incredible struggle and beauty that we create with our clients. How could that be put into the context of a fast food sale, you know? And yet that's what I was seeing around me. So this article gave me an opportunity to articulate that, express it. It was therapeutic for me to be able to write it, and just really meaningful. So again, I appreciate everybody who was part of that opportunity.
I mean, just, you know, as you're talking and distilling some of the core concepts of the original article, of course, my mind goes into a million different directions, right? Because it's so ecological. I mean, I think about how oftentimes the people we work with are called consumers, you know, by administration. They think in terms of consumer-based work. I think in terms of McDonald's wanting to feed you, but it's ultimately not healthy for you. And even when they try to make the menu healthy, it's still not healthy for you. And it still ultimately has dollars and cents kind of attached to it. And you know, just in terms of therapy, wanting, you know, the whether it's insurance in the United States, a brief therapy, wanting to get it as done as quickly as possible and then move on, and band-aid approaches, and how that you know, impacts how people view therapy. So with all of this, these different paths that can possibly influence the ecology that's related to the article. Kerry, what stood out to you the most? What was the most immediate impact for you reading it in relation to your particular context?
Before I answer that, you just made me think of something. Sorry, my head's still there. Because I was thinking when I started at CPRI, right from the very beginning, it was always prove to us that it works. And why is it unique? And the answer that, because I use music, was not acceptable. And because of that, I did research right from the beginning of my career. And that's how I got into doing research. So, okay, so your question was, can you repeat that question again?
Well, no, I was just because that's a great direction to go into it. There's so many different possibilities. You know, my mind goes into so many different directions. I was wondering what stood out to you the most in terms of thinking about this.
Yeah. There's so many things because, yeah, music therapy is my passion. It's not this product. I'm not trying to sell. The fact that I have to charge for my service is because I need to pay my bills, but it's not my get rich thing. It's my passion and my life and what I'm doing. And the people I'm serving are the most vulnerable in society. And so part of me doing what I'm doing is I'm advocating for them because they are the hidden people in society. So in this McMarketing thing that we are in, those hidden people are lost because they don't have any power. They don't have the money. So they're not seen. So their needs and what I am serving them become undervalued. That's one of the things that really pops into my head. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the humanity of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you like to say more about that? The humanity of it?
Yeah. Just, I think for me, we take our gifts and our knowledge, everything we've learned in life, and we give it back, and we create community, and we support each other. And altogether that makes us all healthy and well. So when you start commodifying everything that's done, you break down community. Right now with COVID, people are really feeling that, where we don't have community. Um, and yeah, that then we all start having mental health issues because we do not have connections, we don't have community, we're not giving to each other. It's all about taking, and it's all about using. And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was wondering, Kerry, with that change in perception, just thinking practically, how has that influenced how you go about marketing yourself as a music therapist? I mean, how website or social media, you know, I guess you do a lot of in services as well. How is that, how is those perceptions impacted kind of the day-to-day way you've been working as a private practitioner?
When I first began, especially in the first 10 years, I did tons of presentations for free. Anybody want me to come and talk to them, I came and talked to them. I tried some marketing things like posting ads. This is way back. This is before internet. And I gave up on that. I found the best thing was word of mouth. When websites came out, I got a website, but the purpose of my website, it was just easier to post my information up there for people to see. And it was in the beginning when that's kind of what the internet was for. It was for information. After that point, I didn't market because everybody in London knows me. And I haven't had to seek out work until COVID. COVID has changed my life because it destroyed my practice, because all my people are in lockdown since last March. So
Wow.
I can't go to them, and working online with them doesn't work. So I've been trying to build online services and online programs, and it's a whole new different world. And the whole McMarketing thing uh, is just so pervasive online. The internet is no longer, you know, to me in the beginning, internet was about information and it was a tool to use. Now internet, it's a culture, and pervasive through that culture is that we are the product. And if you want to sell something, you have to be the product. So when I'm doing music therapy and I want to provide music therapy service, I'm not selling music therapy service, I'm selling me, and I have to promote me, which as a therapist, I can't stand it because it's not about me, it's about my client. So I'm struggling with that whole cultural thing, and how can I, work online, but I'm so not comfortable promoting me. It's not about me.
I hear that, and that's I'm sure a lot of people could resonate with that, and I feel like too, Brian, that that's something we see pervasive in academia as well, McMarketing of academia, and how academics feel the pressure to market themselves within that way to instead of it being a shared human knowledge and stakeholdership within knowledge, that oftentimes it can become about the me factor, and that there are a lot of external pressures making that happen as well. That there's a tendency for us to feel shamed as individuals to be doing that when also it is a reflexive checkpoint for each of us. But at the same time, the reality is that there are pressures externally, whether it's capitalism or whether whatever it may be, that feels to be at the heart of where those pressures come from. And do you sense that, Brian, within the current landscape as well, even in this even within our COVID landscape? Still produce, still do business, still do this, that, or the other, and even more so now, show your uniqueness in a time of crisis.
Yeah, I totally do. I really resonate with what Kerry was just saying and what you're asking, Mike. I mean, yeah, and the thing is, our somehow culturally, we don't see health and human well-being as something that's part of our mutual benefit as stakeholders. Like you were saying, why not stakeholdership? Why does it have to be about me versus my clients? Why isn't it about us? You know, we're making a better world together. I may have a professional role because of my unique training as a music therapist, but here we are sharing this cultural, historical resource together in music for the well-being of one another in humanity, individually, in groups and communities. Why isn't that and other forms of healthcare seen as something that we need to do together? You know, but you're right, it's commoditized, and then we have to sell it, and then when we can't, we suffer and our clients suffer. They don't get services, you know, and it just makes everything worse. And it's interesting, you know, as you were talking, a couple of things were coming to mind for me. One is how, for me, I think as I continue in this field of music therapy, I'm realizing that clinical goals are more and more about, to me, you know, they sort of converge on human dignity as like the core, ultimate kind of goal of what we do. Because, you know, we work with people at end of life, they're not going to get better. What is it about their lives that matter? It's that there's meaningfulness, there's dignity, there's, you know, there's an experience of their own unique humanity, relationship, you know, the sense of community, sense of culture. Like these are the things that really count. And the thing about the commercialism is it's pretty undignified. You know, it kind of puts people in this undignified, dehumanizing light. And that's part of what bothers me. And it's what bothered me also about kind of being indoctrinated into a behavioral framework of music therapy, which, you know, that was really popular at the same time that Ray Kroc was popularizing the early stages of McDonald's and fast food. It just all was like, hey, here's a way we can convert people into capital and make it feel American, make it feel patriotic, and you know, so all that manipulation. I wonder about how we're manipulating the public, and in our field, are we manipulating our own clients, you know, performatively to kind of show them off and create this kind of bizarre inspiration thing, you know, image in order to sell what we do, and exploit and use them in the process, you know, and use music in the process that same way. I have that reaction when I hear we use music for non-musical goals in music therapy. You know, I don't know. I think I feel like if we respected what music really was as a lived cultural shared experience of stakeholdership and artistic depth between people, we wouldn't have to see it as something as designed for something other than itself as health, you know? So that's, you both, you know, you're making me think about that too. That's also really important in this vision and in this critique, you know?
So I wonder, Kerry and Brian, with it being Canada, United States, you know, the landscape since you know the 90s and early 2000s. Of course, in the early 2000s, there was a theory explosion within our profession with you know community music therapy coming out and resource-oriented music therapy, and you know a lot of various sociological approaches coming out, and you know within the past 10 plus years yeah, a critical lens, a critical race lens coming, you know, really starting to come out. And the landscape of music therapy is quite different than what it was in the 90s, 90s and early 2000s. But with that said, a lot hasn't changed as well. So I was wondering what you, within your own context, Canada, United States, where you feel like the current landscape is at. You know, Kerry, you've talked a little bit about COVID. Do you feel like you've seen improvements, and if not, where do you feel like we need to develop as a profession, especially within a Canadian perspective?
Wow, that's a hard question. I have not been highly involved in Canadian music therapy for a while. A lot of reasons. Being in London, there wasn't other music therapists, and I was more involved with OT and speech therapists than anything else. And then when I did my master's and PhD, I went into music psychology department. So I'm not overly in touch with other Canadian music therapists. It definitely has changed. So when I started, nobody knew what music therapy was. Now everybody says, oh, music therapy, I know what that is, even if they don't know what it is. And there are definitely people getting jobs. So when I started in Ontario anyway, there was 3 full-time jobs, which were lost about 5 years after I started. Now there are about, I'm going to guess, about 20. So it has improved. It's still hard for people who are graduating, getting out and trying to get work. I haven't observed people, so I don't know what kind of work they're doing. The sense I'm getting, though, is the actual work, whatever words you put on it and however you describe it, it's still the same. It's just we have different words of describing it. So when you go into a long-term care facility, there's only so much you can do. It has to do with how your perception is and how you're presenting it. How people are presenting it, I don't know. In Ontario, we have another qualification. So now I'm also a regulated psychotherapist in the behavioral model. And long-term cares are starting to say you need to have this qualification to be in the long-term care, even though we're not doing crisis management generally in long-term care facilities, and that's what the RP credential's for. But it's like a commodity again. So if I have RP, then it means I can do the work, even if the work's not what falls under the umbrella of RP. I don't know if that makes sense. Neurological music therapy has definitely gotten a hold here. And then University of Toronto and McMaster University both have programs that involve music and health, but aren't music therapy programs. So the people who are going in them are not studying to be a music therapist. They are not getting music therapy qualifications, but those programs are stronger than what the music therapy program. So I'm not sure where we're going as music therapists. We definitely have more music therapists in the hospitals than we used to. And we have people working, but it's still really hard to have a job. And what we do and who we are is not being defined by us. It's being defined by the people who hire us.
Yeah, that feels like an important point. And what I'm hearing from you is that, the cultural dynamics are slow in changing and often reinforce itself over time, doubling down on previous mindsets and just repackaging and renaming them as something new. And so oftentimes dynamics don't change or get rebranded, even though it's not the McRib. It's still, something else. It's still the same junk we're putting in our bodies, just rebranded. But that, like community music therapy, there's a ripple effect in terms of switching your own perception and switching your own perspective, and that switching that perspective and your way of thinking about it and your ethics is an important start, is a vital start towards dynamic change, because as you said, there are forces that feel often outside of us. Does that feel about right?
Yeah, I think so. We're definitely shifting our perspectives. I'm not sure the way we're shifting our perspectives is good. So this in Ontario, we have this RP, regulated psychotherapist. So now the university, we have one university in Ontario that's for music therapy, and they've shifted their entire programming to be able to produce music therapists who fall under psychotherapy and within more of a psychodynamic model. So that's the kind of music therapists that are now getting, that's what they're educating for. And so then music therapy in Ontario is going to be is more increasingly being defined as what an RP does, rather than the full scope of music therapy, which I happen, my PhD and the book that I wrote out of it was looking at the diversity of music therapy, because I love the diversity of music therapy. I think what all the different approaches bring to music therapy just make us richer and more able to serve our clients. So the fact that what we do is being narrowed in Ontario makes me really sad, and makes me, I'm afraid for the other ways and approaches to music therapy that they're going to be lost. So perspectives are being changed, but they're not. I'm not convinced that those changes are in a good way.
And yet your perspective has been changed, and so it truly is the ripple effect. That's important. And I feel what makes this kind of conversation unique is that oftentimes I don't think I've ever seen a dynamic where not only does a reader and a practitioner get to correspond and talk directly with an author about the work, but that you took it upon yourself to write a response paper, and that will influence somebody else. And so it's such a powerful dynamic. I feel like having you both on here to see that relationship unfold, because it's continuing to unfold, and that the good things and the shifts of perspectives start right with you, and that's happened. And Brian, what's your perspective on that?
Well, just to dovetail on that last thought, I mean, to me, that's the spirit of what Voices is about. So that's what I love so much about it. It's not this like scholarly proprietorship. Well, I wrote this and you wrote that, and it's about how are we uplifting and enriching one another and creating opportunities through these dialogues. So yeah, Kerry, what you've done is like you've just that's a perfect example of that. I think what it's the spirit of that. So thank you for that again. And I mean, I've always idolized, probably inappropriately idolized Canada, and thinking more in terms of that you can, you know, um, healthcare, socialized medicine. You can embrace that and not be seen as a commie there. It's like that's, I mean, at least that's my perception. In the United States, this idea of socialized medicine without this commercialized, commoditized side of it, along with every other, aspect of capitalism, is seen as something, automatically extreme left, which to me is just a strange concept. And it ties into, to me, the way that power plays into so much of this. That if we want a job in music therapy, if we want to be able to serve the public, you got to serve the power, and the question of, well, how much can I sell out to that power, and how much do I want to try to, oppose it in some way, and change things? Where's the balance in that? And I respect a lot of my colleagues who have struggled with that, just like you and I have, Kerry, in our own ways. And me in the American context. And I try not to judge people. It's easy for me to get into judgmental mode. Oh, that looks so commercialistic and silly. But I understand, where they're struggling. They want to do this work. They want to be engaged in these beautiful things we're talking about. But the power is where the power is, and if the purse strings are where that power is too. And this also is a slight tangent here, but going back to fast food, I really want to appreciate again Mike for introducing me to the philosophy of KRS-One and the gospel of hip hop, and thinking about how KRS-One talks brilliantly about the commoditization of hip hop, and how part of being a hip hop, like really embracing that healthful identity, is eating well. And it's interesting that in the process of articulating the spirit and the gospel of hip hop, he talks about being the predatory nature of fast food. That it's a metaphor, but it's literal too. And to me, that really sits with me, that there's this sense that you got to watch out for where the power is feeding you, where you are only being fed and nurtured and nourished by those power centers, and what we can do together to shift that, you know?
That's such an interesting, because I remember, working within a pediatric hospital in Philly. I remember thinking, here I am in a place of health, and every day the children were eating mounds of chicken fingers and French fries, chicken fingers and French fries. And I was like, what administration is not thinking about food as part of the health aspect? You go into the cafeteria and none of it was health conscious. The health
Right.
conscious choice was like over here, and like
And
relegated to no fun.
exactly, and here we are as artists, our field is centered in art, which is not at the top of the power hierarchy, right? It's never been. And so, here we are, where we get imported into this paradigm of art fast food, in order to make our profession
Right.
effective and attractive and sellable. And and it really, you can see how that just implicitly involves appropriating the cultural resource of music left and right and destroying its spirit. And then we wonder why people burn out in our field,
Right.
and why they feel disenfranchised and marginalized. And it's that cycle is part of, I think, what we're talking about here. And we're part of a community, I think, that is hoping to find ways to shift that in our own ways.
Carrie, I think about the a new generation of music therapists coming into the profession, most of whom are experts at social media and how to utilize social media, um, how to living in this world of, and also fighting against it at the same time, as many of them looking to develop new ways of breaking free of the traditions of the past, and finding new paths. What would you say to someone starting a career or a private practice in this current landscape, while considering that these very real ethical um, you know challenges that are presented when marketing in a society that values McMarketing?
Wow. Oh, what would I say? Oh, I think ethically it is such a hard line to walk, because I think that sharing our clients' stories and pictures and videos is not good. We're invading their privacy and we're using them, and that's not what we're supposed to do. Um, so you have to think about that when you go about the marketing, which makes it really difficult. The thing I've discovered in the past year is how people online are not willing to read, and you have to capture them with short little videos and memes, and that you have to manipulate them over time. So if you have this thought that they don't understand, you can't just go there. You have to give it to them in little tiny pieces, and little tiny pieces that capture them and keep their attention, so they come back for another piece until they get to the point where, oh, I understand what this is, and now I want to purchase it. So I want that product, or I want that
Is
service.
anybody else thinking about that conditioning? Just like yeah. I mean, just oof, yeah,
Yeah.
Eatables.
yeah, right.
Yeah. So as a therapist, how can we go through that process? Because that is just like, there's a ooh factor there and there's a wrong factor, and that's not. So for somebody new coming out, to figure out how to use social media and not cross that ethical line, and to see that ethical line, because I'm not sure everybody sees that ethical line, but I think that ethical line is so important. Um, it's so hard. Um, with people who did not grow up with the internet, I think we can still reach them in other kinds of ways. But it's going to be for those people that have grown up with the internet, that that's how they understand the world and they're part of that culture. They're going to have to, the new people coming out are going to have to figure out how to reach people online in an ethical way. And
developing new platforms and developing new ideas, and that's going to be a huge challenge. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Are there any concepts or thoughts around this topic that we haven't discussed that you feel like, and you feel like you would like to raise before we say goodbye?
I just wanted to continue on what Brian was saying about power and United States versus Canada. So definitely in Canada, our healthcare is not Marxist. It's part of our life.
There you go.
We get really upset if you even talk about taking it away or making us pay for it. We don't like that. But within that healthcare system, we still have the same problem that you do, because there's only so much money. And there's the whole power dynamic of who gets that money. And then one of the things as a music therapist, I know with my work, it's been very diverse, but it goes where the money pocket is. So there might be things that I do for free or at lesser value. But if I want to survive and work full time as a music therapist and not supplement it with something else, I have to go where the government's sending the money. So that was just a thought I had. Excuse me. So I don't.
Gotta
try not
follow the money.
Yeah, you follow the money, and you try not to do the McMarketing thing, but you still have to somehow show what you do as a value. So the other thought I had was there's a nursing home where I work. And when I started working there, it's an Alzheimer's unit. And all they wanted me to do was to keep the entire unit calm,
Right.
Using music. I can do that. And I've been there for years. And what has developed is first I'm like the Pied Piper. So the moment I walk on that unit, it's like, shoom, everybody's there because I'm the guitar person. But what has also evolved is that the entire facility seems to value what I do. They value not because of anything behavioral, not because they can put a money value on it. They just see, the staff sees how it's important to the residents, but the staff, it's important for them. So now with COVID, I have not been in there since last March. In December, they decided to let me back in because they thought that I was the most valuable thing that was missing from the facility for the health of the staff and the residents. And they did not bother to define it in any other way. They didn't ask for stats. They didn't ask for proof of anything. They've just recognized that whatever it is that I do, don't ask them to explain it because they probably can't do it. But whatever I do is really valuable, which is where we want to go.
So important. And I know there's probably story after story of exactly that, Kerry, of what you're talking about in terms of when music therapists feel like they begin to fit in a facility, it's because of those qualities. And, the paradox becomes, how do we market that? So that we can get more music therapists. But no, how do we just let that be? And how does that influence? That's a tough question because, that's, you're not going to market that,
Yeah.
No one's going to buy that, but yet it is, but it's more valuable than money, obviously. Brian.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't help but see this in in the context of the political backdrop. That there is so much. I feel like so much of the kind of the hostility that we're seeing unleashed in the United States right now is because of the threat that certain power centers are experiencing around a movement toward a model that's closer to something like stakeholdership, human stakeholdership, which includes acknowledging our colonial history. Another thing I'm envious of Canada about, I think they're ahead of the United States by far in that acknowledgement. And our acknowledgement of other forms of oppression. And these things are beginning to come out and becoming part of a mainstream consciousness, and that's threatening those power centers. So there's all this backlash, and it's terrifying. And I think we as music therapists, as artists, as people involved in health and healing community, we are in so many ways at the epicenter of that dialectic. And so I feel like this topic is one important facet of all of that. You know, this the socioeconomics of what we do and who we are as music therapists, how we represent ourselves, where we feel okay, and you know, representing our services and what we do. And so, you know, so much of that I think is at the core of this question, and it's very timely. So I'm grateful again that we have a chance to discuss this, and that you know that Kerry, you've given it a sort of its own new life in this way. So thank you for that, and I just hope this can keep going and expanding.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah. Kerry, any final words to carry us on?
Just that I think, as far as McMarketing goes, I think and I hope that there's COVID might give us a silver lining in that it might shift us a little bit, because people are starting to understand the importance of community and of connecting, and that mental health is so important for everyone, so that maybe it will shift us a little away from McMarketing, and people will start to value the other things in life, you know, the concept of just doing for the sake of doing, this doing to give back to community and to create community and to be part of community. So maybe that will, I'm being hopeful, but maybe it will help chip it away at the McMarketing thing and lead us to a little better and more healthy place as a society.
Thank you. Yes, let's hope that's would be a silver lining.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Kerry. Thank you both for joining us this evening, and for talking about this and dialoguing. It's quite a pleasure to have facilitated and to be joining you tonight.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, this is awesome.
Thanks again, Mike, and thank you to Voices.
Absolutely. Thank you for watching. Please make sure that you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can receive notifications. Next week, we're happy to welcome Tanya Silvera, who will talk about her latest article, But Where Are You Really From? Approaching Music Therapy Research and Practice as an Australian of Indian Origin. See you then.